It was Wednesday afternoon, 2:15 p.m., the kind of quiet hour when a courtroom usually feels routine, almost forgettable. But that silence didn't last. An 18-year-old young man walked through the doors of Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom with a posture that didn't belong there. His shoulders were loose. His smile was careless, and in his eyes, there was no fear, only expectation. This wasn't the look of someone facing justice. It was the look of someone who believed this was just another inconvenience his father would erase. His name was Tyler Madison, a freshman at Brown University, and more importantly, at least in his own mind, the son of State Senator William Madison, chairman of the Rhode Island Senate Judiciary Committee, a man whose phone calls carried weight, a man who knew judges funded campaigns and understood how power moved behind closed doors. Tyler had grown up watching problems disappear: parking tickets, school discipline, late-night mistakes, all solved quietly, all handled by someone else. So when he stood before Judge Caprio that afternoon, charged with vandalizing a war memorial, public intoxication, and assaulting a 67-year-old security guard, Tyler didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed that this minor incident was stealing his afternoon, annoyed that adults were overreacting, annoyed that anyone believed the rules applied to him. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, one that cost more than most families spend on rent in a month. And when he greeted the judge, his voice carried the same tone a teenager might use with a school principal: polite on the surface, dismissive underneath. What Tyler didn't understand, what he had never been forced to learn, was that this courtroom was not impressed by last names, not intimidated by political power, and not willing to tolerate disrespect, especially toward those who had served and sacrificed. So here's the question that would define everything that followed. What happens when a privileged young man finally meets a judge who cannot be pressured, cannot be bought, and refuses to look away? It started on a Saturday night, the kind of night that blurs judgment and exposes character. Near Brown University, music spilled out of a fraternity house where Tyler Madison had been drinking for hours. Laughter echoed. Phones were raised. Every moment was recorded, every impulse encouraged. By midnight, alcohol had stripped away restraint, replacing it with bravado. That was when someone suggested a prank. Downtown, standing in quiet dignity, was the Providence War Memorial, a place built not for attention, but for remembrance. Names carved into stone, stories carried by families, silence meant to honor sacrifice. To Tyler and his friends, it was just another backdrop. Security camera footage later showed Tyler stepping forward with a spray can in his hand. The hiss of paint broke the night air. Vulgar images, obscenities, words chosen not for meaning but for shock. His friends laughed and filmed, urging him on, capturing every second for social media. This wasn't art. It wasn't protest. It was drunken disrespect. And then came Robert Santos, 67 years old, a Vietnam veteran, 15 years working security at that memorial without a single incident. Santos approached calmly. No yelling, no threats, just a simple request to stop, to respect the space, to put the can down. What happened next revealed everything Tyler believed about the world. Instead of apologizing, Tyler shoved him. The push was sudden and forceful. Santos lost his balance and fell hard onto the concrete steps, his head striking the edge. Blood pooled quickly. The laughter stopped. Phones dropped. For a brief moment, reality cut through the haze of alcohol. Santos would later require 6 stitches for a head wound. At 67, a fall like that is not minor. It is dangerous. When police arrived, they found no remorse. Tyler didn't ask if the man was okay. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look concerned. Instead, he looked annoyed. And then he said the words that would follow him into the courtroom. "Do you know who my father is?" He said it confidently, casually, as if it were a shield, as if his last name mattered more than the blood on the ground. "Senator Madison is going to destroy your careers over this harassment." In that moment, Tyler wasn't speaking as a frightened teenager. He was speaking as someone who had watched power work his entire life. 4 days later, that belief hadn't changed. As Tyler prepared to enter Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, he wasn't worried about evidence. The security footage was clear. The charges were serious. What he was worried about was how long this would take. To Tyler, this wasn't about accountability. It was about inconvenience. He expected the same ending he'd always known. A phone call. A quiet arrangement. A problem erased before it ever became real. What he didn't understand was this. That night at the War Memorial wasn't just a mistake. It was a line crossed. And in Judge Caprio's courtroom, some lines cannot be uncrossed. Tyler Madison didn't walk into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom like a defendant. He walked in like a guest who expected to be excused early. The tailored suit fit perfectly. The shoes were polished. The expression on his face suggested mild irritation, not concern. As he approached the defense table, he scanned the room the way someone scans a waiting area checking the time, calculating how long this inconvenience might last. Behind him sat his attorney, Margaret Whitfield. Her reputation was well known, expensive, connected, trusted by families who believed problems could be managed with the right words and the right relationships. Judge Caprio began the hearing calmly, reading the charges aloud. Vandalism of a public monument, public intoxication, assault on a security guard, disturbing the peace. The words hung heavy in the air. Before Tyler could respond, his attorney stood. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "my client pleads not guilty to all charges. We believe this was a college prank that has been blown completely out of proportion due to my client's family connections." The courtroom stirred. Judge Caprio looked up slowly. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, measured and firm, "are you suggesting that vandalizing a war memorial and assaulting a security guard qualifies as a college prank?" Before she could answer, Tyler spoke. It was the first moment the room truly shifted. "Your Honor," Tyler said, stepping slightly forward, "I need to clarify something. This is being treated like a major criminal incident when all I did was create temporary artwork on public property." Judge Caprio removed his glasses and placed them on the bench. "Temporary artwork." "Yes," Tyler continued, gaining confidence. "The memorial can be cleaned. No permanent damage was done, and the security guard wasn't seriously injured." The silence that followed was not confusion, it was disbelief. Tyler mistook it for attention. "I'm an art student at Brown University," he added. "I study contemporary social expression. What I created was commentary. It was meant to challenge how society glorifies military violence instead of promoting peace." Judge Caprio studied him carefully. "Mr. Madison, the judge, said you spray-painted vulgar images and profanity on a memorial honoring fallen veterans." Tyler sighed softly, as if explaining something obvious. "Your Honor, you're interpreting symbolic imagery too literally. Artistic expression isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's meant to provoke." Whitfield tried to intervene. "Your Honor, my client is young, and—" "I was very deliberate," Tyler interrupted her. "This court needs to understand that not all violations are equal. When someone with my education creates public art, it should be evaluated differently." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Caprio raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Madison," he said, "are you claiming your education exempts you from laws protecting public monuments?" "I'm saying people with advanced artistic training understand expression differently." The judge paused. "Let's talk about the assault." Tyler's tone shifted, cooler, dismissive. "The security guard interfered with my artistic process," he said. "He became aggressive. I was trying to explain my work, but he escalated the situation." "You escalated it by pushing him to the ground," Judge Caprio replied. "I was creating space," Tyler said. "He approached me physically." Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Santos is 67 years old. He was hospitalized with a head injury requiring 6 stitches. Tyler shrugged. "Older people sometimes have balance issues," he said. "If he fell that easily, maybe he shouldn't be working security. This incident might help him realize he needs a job better suited to his limitations." The words landed hard. A veteran, a man protecting a memorial, blamed for being injured. Judge Caprio's voice dropped. "Mr. Madison, are you blaming the victim for being assaulted?" "I'm saying physical readiness matters in security work." The courtroom no longer murmured. It simmered. And Tyler, still unaware of how close he was to the edge, continued speaking. What he believed was intellectual defense was becoming something else entirely. Something colder, something dangerous. And Judge Caprio was listening to every word. The courtroom had grown tense. Not loud, not chaotic, just tight, like everyone in the room felt the air getting thinner. Tyler Madison still believed he was explaining himself. In his mind, this wasn't defiance. It was clarification. He stood there with the confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Judge Frank Caprio looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Madison, the judge, said you assaulted a 67-year-old man who was doing his job." Tyler exhaled sharply. "Your Honor, I think you're ignoring an important factor. Mr. Santos escalated the situation because he didn't understand what he was witnessing." The words landed wrong. "How so?" Judge Caprio asked. "Cultural misunderstanding," Tyler replied. "People without artistic or academic training sometimes react defensively to unfamiliar forms of expression. That's not malicious, it's just a gap in understanding." A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting Mr. Santos assaulted you with ignorance?" "I'm saying," Tyler continued, that education changes perception. When someone lacks exposure to contemporary thought, they can misinterpret intent. Judge Caprio leaned forward, and that justified pushing him to the ground. Tyler paused, then answered with chilling confidence. I believe it explains why the situation unfolded the way it did. The judge nodded slowly. Mr. Madison, he said, Mr. Santos is a Vietnam veteran. Tyler's expression barely changed. That doesn't change the facts, he said. Respectfully. Your Honor, military service doesn't automatically make someone qualified for every role. Security work requires physical readiness. The courtroom froze. Judge Caprio's voice was controlled. You are aware Mr. Santos required 6 stitches to his head. Tyler shrugged again. Older individuals fall more easily, he said. That's biology, not malice. Maybe this incident will help him realize it's time to retire and let younger, more capable people handle these responsibilities. The words didn't echo. They cut. A veteran, blamed for bleeding, dismissed as obsolete. Judge Caprio's jaw tightened. Mr. Madison, he said, do you believe a man who served his country and protected that memorial for 15 years deserved what happened to him? Tyler hesitated, then made his choice. I believe educational differences create communication failures, he said. If Mr. Santos had approached the situation with more cultural sensitivity, this could have been avoided. That was it. The room didn't react at first. Not with sound, not with movement. It reacted with shock. Tyler had just suggested that a Vietnam veteran needed sensitivity training after being assaulted. Judge Caprio straightened in his chair. Mr. Madison, he said, his voice now cold in 30 years on this bench. I have seen arrogance. I have seen privilege. I have seen entitlement. He paused. But I have never seen someone use education as a weapon to justify attacking a veteran. Tyler opened his mouth, still convinced he could explain his way out. And in that moment, the line was crossed. This was no longer about a mistake. It was no longer about youth. It was no longer about vandalism. It was about contempt for service, for age, and for accountability itself. And Judge Caprio was done listening. Tyler Madison sensed the shift too late. The room had changed, not because voices were raised, but because patience was gone. Your Honor, Tyler said, trying one last angle. I believe this case is being influenced by personal bias. This should be handled administratively, not criminally. My father can arrange restitution and community service that would benefit everyone. The courtroom gasped. Judge Frank Caprio looked at him steadily. Mr. Madison, he said, did you just suggest that your father can override criminal law? Tyler straightened his shoulders. I'm saying that people with political experience understand how to resolve delicate situations more effectively than the traditional justice system, he replied. My family has handled matters like this for generations. That was the moment. Judge Caprio stood up. The sound of his chair moving echoed louder than any shout. Mr. Madison, the judge said, his voice firm and unmistakable. You believe your father's political position places you above the law. Tyler answered without hesitation. My dad will handle this. He always does. Senator Madison has connections at every level of government in this state. One phone call and this all goes away. The words hung in the air, an open declaration of entitlement. And then Tyler went further. My father has been generous to judicial campaigns, he added. He remembers who helps his family and who makes problems. The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Caprio's expression hardened. Mr. Madison, he said, you have just threatened this court while showing complete contempt for veterans, victims, and the judicial process. Tyler's confidence finally cracked. Your Honor, I think you're misunderstanding. Bailiff Judge Caprio said calmly, place Mr. Madison in restraints. Time stopped. Tyler's face drained of color. You can't do this, he shouted. My father oversees judicial appointments. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice. Your father's influence didn't stop you from committing crimes, he said, and it will not protect you from consequences. As handcuffs closed around Tyler's wrists, panic replaced arrogance. Judge Caprio delivered the sentence with precision. Mr. Madison, you are sentenced to 6 months in county jail for assault, contempt of court, and threatening a judicial proceeding. Tyler's voice broke. That will destroy my college career. Your college career ended when you vandalized a war memorial and assaulted a veteran, the judge replied. And you will pay full restitution for memorial restoration, medical expenses, and court costs totaling $47,000. Tyler screamed that his father would never allow it. Then you will remain in custody until it is paid, Judge Caprio said, as Tyler was led away, shouting threats that now sounded hollow. Judge Caprio spoke one final truth. Political power ends where accountability begins. And in that moment, the courtroom understood the lesson Tyler never had. The courtroom emptied slowly that afternoon. The shouting was gone. The threats had faded. and the silence that remained felt different, heavier, steadier, earned. Tyler Madison spent the next 6 months in county jail, not as a political heir, not as a promising student, but as an inmate learning what limits feel like. There were no tailored suits, no private calls, no shortcuts, just time. Time to sit with what he had done. Time to realize how quickly arrogance collapses when power can no longer shield it. Outside those walls, the consequences spread. The video of Tyler's courtroom meltdown didn't disappear. It traveled across social media, across news stations, across kitchen tables where voters watched, paused, and asked themselves hard questions about entitlement and leadership. 6 months later, a special election delivered its verdict. Senator William Madison lost his seat. Campaign ads replayed his son's words. "My dad will handle this. One phone call and it goes away." Voters listened and decided that someone who raised a son to believe that power replaces accountability had no business overseeing justice. The Providence War Memorial was restored, the paint removed, the stone cleaned. But the damage Tyler caused couldn't be erased so easily. Judge Caprio kept a photograph of the restored memorial on his desk, not as a reminder of Tyler Madison, but as a reminder of what the law is meant to protect. Not privilege, not influence, but dignity, sacrifice, memory. This case was never really about vandalism, or even about assault. It was about a young man who believed education made him superior, a family who believed influence made them untouchable, and a system tested by someone who thought justice could be negotiated. Judge Caprio reminded everyone watching that some things are not negotiable. Respect for veterans, respect for the rule of law, respect for the idea that no last name carries more weight than the truth. Tyler walked into that courtroom believing his future was protected by power. He walked out learning that power ends where accountability begins. And maybe that was the only lesson that could ever reach him. If this story moved you, if you believe that political influence should never silence justice, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Subscribe for more courtroom moments that prove compassion and accountability can exist together. And remember, this real justice doesn't bend. It stands especially when standing is hardest.